Welcome to Easter Camp 2020. This is not how we imagined it. We have prepared such an awesome camp. I was so looking forward to it. But alas, we're in lockdown, and so we get to enjoy Easter Camp for the first time in I don't know how long, if ever, from the comfort of our own lounge. So hopefully you've built your tent, you've built your cubby house, you've built your little fort in the lounge out of pillows and sheets and stuff like that. You've got all your nibbles ready to go and your glasses of Coke and water, of course. And just buckle in for a great Easter camp at home. We're going to bring you worship. We're going to bring you daily highlights every day. We're going to bring you some of our speakers, throwbacks from the past. We're going to give you, hopefully, the most amazing Easter camp messages that we can. So tonight we're going to have some worship, we're going to have some spoken word, and we're going to have a talk about story. I mean, the talk we're going to have tonight is about what are you known for? What do you want to be known for? What is your story? And how can your story change? Because your story meshes with the story of Christ. Relax, sit back, and enjoy what we've got for you tonight.
at the light and see your story. You are safe here. You belong here. You are home here. You are the home. You are the home. You are the home. We are the home. We are the home. This is the dawning of faith. This is the earth in restoration. This is the heart of Yahweh, face to face. with all creation. Wake up, so wake up to your light. Wake up to our Father. You are created to shine, to be the brightest among them.
I am 13, and my house is on fire. Inside, my mother's muscles are quietly screaming, does not want to admit how tired she is of being brick, whatever will keep this charmed life from burning down for us. My stepfather does not even notice the matches jutting from the teeth of his resentment. This is not the photo he has framed in his office. We are supposed to call him Daddy. My mother is supposed to obey him. I am a fisher, busying my nets with grades and sports and awards, charming and chatty and so capable, no one can smell the ash, dusting my sheets. I am made of inherited steel, molded magnet for whatever will tell me I am good, I am loved, I will not be left, I will not be destroyed. Look at all these pretty fish I am dragging in. I am 13, the first time I really get an eye on you, and I'm not sure you're anything more than the genie I wish to when I really want something. But you move in anyway, as if you don't notice what's happening here. Of course, this will be temporary, won't it? You will go when it gets too hot in here, will you not? You will leave when we don't obey you, won't you? Look at all these pretty fish I am dragging in for you. I am 15, and I wonder how you continue here. A tree growing root without being taken by the flame. I have no choice but to find cover in you. You, the best safety I come to know. You, unshaken by the sharp echo of a fight. You, who can't take your loving eyes off of me. You, hardly noticing these hands made of nets. You, a promise we will not be crushed. You, hope of a different way. I am 17, and I cannot take myself away from you. I wake up in the middle of the night listening for your voice. I sew your promises into my graduation cap. I dream of a future doused with light. When I stand up to the beast who tells me I am just another burning house in the making, you are my hype man, my backup, my corner coach. You tell me I am the fire, so I need not be afraid of it. When I agonize over eyes that cannot see you yet, you place a grain of sand in my palm as a reminder of how small and important we all are inside of eternity. Patience, you say. Steady, you say. When I begin to wonder what to do with this life I newly long for, when I realize I'm only on one edge of what is possible, I toss everything I have earned from the nets into a bonfire on the shore, given I'm not afraid of them anymore. Who cares about all the pretty fish I've been dragging in or this beach I am leaving behind? Look at me, looking at you. I am walking on water.
Good evening, Easter Camp. Yeah. Welcome. I just want to thank my friends for starting us off so well with that mean as mihi whakatau. And the worship band. Oh, that's just going to grow and grow and grow all weekend. And I'm just looking forward to see what God will do with us in those times. But I want to see tonight who's in the house tonight. I'm going to give you a chance to scream your lungs out. But you've got to be ready for this. Don't give me we weren't ready. I want to know. Get ready. Who is from the Waikato? Not bad, Waikato. Not bad. We're going over to the east now. Who's from the Bay of Plenty, Gisborne? I think you could do better than that. There's more of you representing. Who's from north of the Harbour Bridge? Anybody from Auckland? All right. What I love about this camp is that there's so many young people from so many areas, and we all come together, and it doesn't matter if you're from the Waikato or the Bay of Plenty or from Auckland, together here tonight we're one. And we're going to experience what God can do among us together as one. There's going to be heaps of stories coming out of your camp. So the theme this year is story. I love a good story. Who doesn't like, who loves a story, right? We all love a story. We all love telling a story. Do you know that when you get a good story, you get caught up in the story, you can actually imagine what's happening in that story. You can imagine yourself in the story. You can imagine the characters of that story. You can feel emotionally attached to that story. That's what stories do, and stories are very, very powerful. Or some stories are stink, and it depends on who's telling the story, eh? But the older you get in life, the more stories you accumulate in life. And because I'm an old crusty fella, I want to share a couple of stories with you tonight. And I want you to imagine yourself in these stories. Once when I was a younger fella, I went eeling. Who's been eeling? Yeah. You know how you touch those eels and they're slimy and black and they're wriggly and they just get out of your hands? It's, yeah. But I was after the granddaddy eels, the big eels. And down near my sister's place, there was a creek, and the big granddaddy eels were there. And I knew I was going to get those. Now, I didn't want to catch those eels and eat them. I wanted to relocate them. So me and my friends went, and we were splashing around in the water with all our big torches, and then we saw this big granddaddy eel, and I jumped on this thing. I jumped on it, and it was so big that my hands couldn't touch each other. It was just that big, and it was like as high as my shoulder. And I grabbed this eel, and I got it into a headlock, and I ran with this eel into the field. And as I was running into the field, the eel's tail was so long, it tripped me up, and I fell back down, and the eel was on me. It was like I was wrestling an anaconda. And my friends were laughing at me, going, "Go Blue, go Blue," and it was biting on my foot. And it was such a funny time. We rolled around and laughed. It was hilarious. Now, the thing about that story was that for months and months afterwards, my friends said, "Oh man, blue, he got this big as eel, and it was so funny, and he got covered in slime and all that sort of stuff, and it was great. And I started to think about, in our lives, there's only a couple of stories that will outlive us. You know, when we're dead and gone, and our families are talking about us, they're only going to say a couple of things about us. And I thought, how stink would it be if in 50 years' time, after I'm dead, my relatives in the future, my grandchildren say, my granddad, he was an eel hunter. And he wrestled this big eel. You should have seen him. I've got to get better life stories, I thought. You know? And the reason I thought that was because I have such a relative. He's dead. He's my great uncle somewhere way back in the day, and he was a gold digger. And he was panning for gold and all that sort of stuff. And his job was to weigh the gold that all the prospectors would bring in. And he would dig his fingers into the gold. He would dig in there and he would run them around, and then he would just, well, I don't know. And then he'd dig around in the gold again. He'd scratch his beard, I don't know. And then they'd settle on a price, and then they would walk out with their payment, and then he'd go and brush his beard out. And all the gold dust and that would fall out of his beard, and that's how he made his money. He stole things. You know what? That is the only story I know about that dude. That he was a thief and used to rip off people's gold. And I think that stink. I don't know who he was. I was put to shame one night when I went around to a friend's place for dinner, and his wife pulled out this letter, and she started to read this letter from her great mumble grandfather, who used to be an army officer in the Civil War. And the letter he wrote to his wife. And he talked about such things as what was happening to his comrades. He talked about what it was like in the war. He talked about the things that mattered to him. He talked about missing her and longing to be home with her, the kind of life they were going to create, hope, meaning, purpose, destiny, all those things he was writing about. And it was powerful. I felt that I knew something about who he was, even though he wasn't a relative of mine. At that time, I didn't feel the need to say to her, hey, once I wrestled an eel, you know, or my uncle, he was a gold digger. Nah, it was stink. I thought, get better life stories. And so it got me to thinking about, what are the life stories that I'm living now? What are the stories that I'm living now? And how did I get to live the stories that I live now? We've all got a story. We're all living out a narrative of our lives, a story that we think about ourselves, that we tell about ourselves, that other people tell about us. Right now, right here in this room, you all have a story, you know? The thing that you believe about yourself. Now, the thing is, with stories that we live out today are often placed in the past. They're often stories that we did way back here at a time, you know? And the ramifications of that story are living out now in our lives today. And sometimes those stories are really cool stories. Sometimes those stories are when we saved the day. We were the hero. We fought the fight. We told the joke that was so funny that everybody laughed. And we love it when people tell stories about us of when we won, that when we were good. We love people telling stories about us, about things we love. People we love. I love it when people tell stories to me about my kids. Oh, your kids are so awesome and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, they don't know that it's all about their mum, you know. So the thing for me is, if the past is important, what's the story you're living out today? What is your story? See, here's the thing. Some of our stories we're not so proud of. Some of the stories that we lived in the past, we don't want to be told anymore. We'd rather those stories just get lost in people's memory. Once when I was a really young fella, I went to school and the teacher had a very important question for the class. She said, I want everybody to write down their telephone number and their address. Now, back in the day, we didn't have mobile phones. We had the big dial-up phones. And if you got the number wrong, you had to start again, and it just took so long for the dial to go around. And I was stuck, you know, because we hadn't lived that long in our house, about 3 years. I didn't know where we lived. Oh, I didn't know my telephone number. I thought, oh, stink. So I had to go up to the teacher and say, oh, excuse me, miss, you know, I don't know where I live. And she goes, you don't know where you live. I mean, do you know your telephone number? Do you know who your parents are? And I wanted to say to her, man, my parents had 8 kids, and I'm the youngest of 8 kids, and they got better things to do than tell me where I lived. But I can show you where I live. If you come with me after school, I can take you to where I live. And she said, She wrote me a note, and I had to go to my brother's classroom and hand the note to his teacher. And then she sent me to my brother, and the whole class. What do you do if somebody comes into your class? You stop and you listen, right? And I had to just go up to my brother and go, do you know where we live? What's our telephone number? Like that, he's just go, you know? I mean, I was only 14. How was I supposed to know these things? No, I was real young. But it's kind of weird. I had to go back to my class, hand my address to my teacher, and she got me up the front of class and read that note to everybody in the class. So everybody in my class knew where I lived, and they knew my telephone number. And they kept on reminding me of that story again and again and again and again. Now here's the weird thing. Never before had I ever felt dumb. But that day I felt dumb. That day I felt as dumb as a bag of hammers, and I felt shame for the first time. I'd never felt shame before. I didn't really know what that was until that day. But that day, I started to believe that I was dumb. I started to believe that I am a product of that which they are telling me I am. And that became part of my story. Eh? Isn't it weird? Isn't it weird that something we do way back here affects who we think we are today? We can't change the past. It's a story. But we can, and the past has an echo of a sting with it sometimes, but it still informs us who we think we are today. Now here is the crazy part of that. Something that I did when I was really young could be affecting me to who I am today, and the story I think is true about myself today because others said it was true about me. It can be projected into tomorrow, right? What I do and what I think about who I am today is probably who I am going to become tomorrow, right? And if that's based on what I've done in the past, I'm trapped. What do I do to escape this? Have you ever felt like you've been trapped and you can't actually change who you think you are and you believe what people say you are? I knew I had accumulated a lot of this belief. And when I was about your age, I actually felt trapped, and I felt like my path, my life, my story was going to go down a predestined track, and I had nothing I could do about it. I needed to do something so different, take drastic action. I needed to change my story. And so I turned to Jesus, and I got involved in his story. Getting involved in the story of Jesus changed my story forever. I want to share a story in the old scriptures about Jesus. So Jesus was in the desert, and he was in a region that he shouldn't have been in the foothills, and it was hot, hot, hot. And he wanted a drink, and he sat down next to a well. And as he sat down next to the well was deep, and he had no bucket. He couldn't get water to drink. And there in the distance, there was a woman, and she came in the middle of the day in the beating hot sun to get water. Now, she had a bucket. Jesus didn't have a bucket. And so he asked her, "Can I have a drink?" And that's a very strange thing. They only had two things in common, this woman and Jesus. They were both out there in the middle of the day, and they were both thirsty and hot. Nothing else. His people were from a different people. They didn't like their people. He shouldn't have been in the place that he was. She shouldn't have been alone in the middle of the day. A man should not have been talking to a woman at that time. It was dangerous for her. And so she didn't get him a drink of water. She asked him another question. She said, "Why are you talking to me? Your people don't talk to my people." You see, she was out in the middle of the day because she was shunned by the other people of her village. She shouldn't have been there. The other women, they traveled in groups safely in the mornings when the sun wasn't so hot, but not her. They wouldn't let her travel with them because she had a story, okay, a story that they didn't like. And so when Jesus asked her for a drink of water, "Why are you talking for me?" Then Jesus asks her another question, right to the heart of the matter. "Where's your husband?" She shouldn't have been alone. She said, "I have no husband." And Jesus says, I know. You have had 5 husbands, and the man that you're living with right now isn't even your husband. But how did he know that stuff, eh? So, shamed, outcasted, in a dangerous position, vulnerable in the middle of the desert, with Jesus asking for water. Her story wasn't good, but he was about to change her story. So what he does is he wants to talk to her about thirst and water. He talked to her about other things, but the thirst is not the thirst of drinks that you have. The thirst that Jesus wanted to talk to her about was the thirst that your soul craves, not your tongue. The water that he wanted to talk to her about was living water that she could experience if her story was overlapped with his story. Have you ever been thirsty on a hot day and you just down this cold, icy water and it just like goes through your whole body and you just feel, it's like 1,000 times better than that. The thirst that Jesus quenches is for meaning and purpose. And so this is what they had after their conversation. She runs back to her village, and this is what she says. She runs and yells out to everybody, come and see the man who told me everything about my life. Now, I've always read that and thought, that's a bit strange. They already know what you've done with your life. That's because you are shunned and they don't like your story. They want another story, not your story. But she's saying, everything about my life. Now, here's the thing. Jesus didn't sit her down for 4 days and tell her every single thing about her life. It's just that he didn't judge her for the life that she'd lived. He spoke a different sort of thing to her as one of life. He told her who she truly was. He told her the story of who she really was instead of the story she believed that she was. And something changed right there for her. To the degree that she goes into the village and for the first time, she declares to everybody with no shame, he told me everything I ever did. Wouldn't it be amazing to sit in the presence of the Almighty God and him to say, I've told you everything that you are because I've told you who you really are and who you were created to be. That's a Jesus worth following. See, something happens when your story starts to overlap with his story. When his story becomes part of your story, the trajectory of your life changes. The past that you had over here, it's just an echo. It's not no sting to the life that you can live now. See, when you were created, Jesus imagined this amazing story that you were the main character of. He imagined a life for you that you could have if you could just feel free from the shame of your past. And he wants your story to overlap with his story so that you could walk in freedom. So over this camp, there are going to be moments when we're talking about the story thing. The most amazing story ever told is the Easter story. There are moments at this camp where you might hear the whisper of God's voice in your soul, in your very being. What will you do? There will be moments in this camp where you feel overwhelmed with a presence because God's knocking on the door of your soul, wanting to invite you, because he's always a gentleman, invite you to walk with him and join his story. My hope for you after this camp is that you leave and you will shout and declare to the people next week, the month after, come, I want to have a talk to you about the man, Jesus, who told me everything I ever was. A true story, one that you walk in with grace and freedom, free from shame. There's the challenge for you this weekend. Can I pray for you guys? Lord, I pray your Holy Spirit just pours out on this place, meets us here again and again. Lord, I pray that we have a safe camp, a fun camp, but a life-changing camp. Lord, we want you to show up in your power. We want you to show up. We want to hear your voice. Guide us in your ways. We love you. Amen. I'll see you out there. Make sure you have fun.